So Ryan and I were just talking about how no one is really talking about this hidden gem of finding off-market business acquisition deals. And I think it's because it's not so immediately obvious until you kind of find it by accident. So I found this deal pretty recently, actually, just because of a friend of mine looking for really a new space to rent or to buy for her business. Without saying too much about the business, it's kind of a light industrial type of business. They do very like industrial type of work. So they need a very specific space, like a warehouse space that allows that type of thing. And she needs a very specific space because it needs to have basically a kind of a showroom and a warehouse. So anyway, she's shopping around for spaces around the area that we live in, Central Florida, trying to find different possible spaces to either buy or move into. And she stumbles across one that I think didn't really fit the exact category that she needed. But come to find out that the owner of this building is selling the building and the business together in it. And so she mentioned it to me just to look at, and I ended up, talking to the seller of the business and the real estate agent representing it and everything, and been kind of like discussing it and just seeing whether there's something to be done here. The very interesting thing about it is it's actually not listed anywhere on any of the business listing sites. So it's kind of an off-market business acquisition deal, even though it's on market for real estate, which I think is just kind of a unique angle. And the reason I think this is kind of a hidden gem is because I think deals like this, because one of the best ways to get a bigger offer for your business is to market it out there to as many people as possible that are already looking for a business to acquire. You as someone who finds something a little more off the books like this, you might be able to get a better deal on it or more favorable terms.
And also, for everybody watching, this is Deal Flow Live. My name is Ryan Santo. I'm your other host over there, the very excitable, the very wonderful, the very intelligent Mr. Brody Vinson. We do this every week where we break down deals and new information coming out of the business world, and we talk about it. And today we're talking about this off-market strategy. Now, that term can kind of be a little scary, and it can kind of sound like we're about to sell you a course, which we're not. So, to Brody's point, he stumbled upon this listing through a previous client that he had worked to help, kind of rehab and revitalize a business, and it was very I wouldn't say funny, but it was sort of kind of the listing language was unique, where they basically said, and there's a business on here if you want that too. We'll just throw it in, honestly. And frankly, that's kind of how it, when you talk to them, it's kind of how they felt about it. It was kind of like, this is a one package deal. You can take the business, you can bulldoze it. We don't care. We're just pricing the land out business there if you want it, which is completely, I think, completely out of the ordinary for most people that have a business, especially if they're still running it to a degree.
Now, in the case of this one in particular, the business is, it's in a little bit of decline. So the interesting thing is sometimes there can be these situations where the actual operating of a business like this, like if it's in a situation like that where they're not listing the business, it might be because the business is in decline and it's in need of someone to kind of turn it around, so to speak. But that presents some interesting opportunities too, right? You could, if you want to put in the work and you feel like you can do it and you can turn the business around, you could potentially acquire the real estate just off of the value of the real estate with the right type of loan. And if the business is able to service that debt, and maybe even pay you on top of that, well, hopefully it would need to be paying you on top of that if you're going to take it over. But if it can pay you out of the business to run it and it can still service the debt of the real estate of paying the rent, then okay, you're putting yourself in a pretty decent situation because you're building the equity of the real estate that you own, and you're also, building this business that could pay you potentially an income. So it's very interesting. It's the type of thing that, it can take kind of a real estate investment and make it a very active investment. Or, if you know someone, you could potentially, if it's priced such that it's worth the asking price just off of the real estate alone, or you're able to get the right type of price for it, then the debt service of the real estate could then kind of determine what do you need to charge for market rent. Let's say there's a countertop business that you find that's selling in this, and maybe the business is kind of in decline, they want to shut down, but maybe you find a friend that has another countertop business and they want to switch and they want to rent there. And so you could get the loan for the real estate, you could charge rent to this new tenant, maybe even make a deal where you're seller financing them this business, or the assets of what's left of it and the clients that are coming from it. Or you've got some kind of revenue share deal, where you're kind of tied into the upside of the business a little bit. So there's lots of different creative deals that you could do with things like this. Or maybe it's a distressed situation. Maybe it's someone who bought the business and the real estate at some point, and they're not making it work with the business, and you see this and you're like, I don't know why they're not making it work. I can make it work because I have this background, or I have this resource, this capital that they don't have. So lots of interesting potential situations out there. But the thing that kind of strikes me the most about this is just that, these deals might be sitting there. They might be sitting out there without other eyes on them that are trying to make these types of deals.
And I think it's good to point out that when it comes to a deal like this, it is more than likely an issue of a failing business or a business in decline. Very rarely would somebody put a perfectly good business just in a real estate deal. So expect there to be a graveyard's worth of skeletons in the closet there. But as Brody said, if you have the experience, you have the knowledge, and perhaps even the capital to back you up, you have a very high ceiling to get in on something and kind of turn it around. And of course, real estate is the ripcord in many situations, especially when it comes to business. Yeah, your business might fail, but you can recoup and even possibly profit if you own the land under it. So, worst case, if you buy correct, you'll come out break even and probably more than likely ahead in the worst case. But in situations like this, you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to have your capital right, because I can almost promise you, even though the SBA will put real estate into a transaction and their loans, they will not do it for a business that is not profitable. They will still say, we won't loan money for a dying business. And that is also something to reconsider, because could be a deal of a lifetime, but you're going to need to bring your own cash to the table for it.
And realistically, if the business is in decline, right, you got a couple options. It's either you close the business and you put a new tenant in, or you figure out how to turn around the business. So you don't want to get into a deal like this if you're not prepared to do one of those two things. That's the reality of the situation. You've got to do one of those two things. But if one of those can be done, then you could just end up getting a business for really. I mean, in the case of the one that we're looking at, it's really not worth money per se because it's in decline. But there's definitely upside to be unlocked with it. It's going to take a lot of active effort to make it such. That's the key kind of factor here, is like, this business is not just going to cash flow on its own. It's going to take a lot of consistent active effort. But if you're someone who's looking for that type of situation, you're not just looking for a more passive real estate deal, maybe this is an interesting one. You could go find a fixer upper, like a residential property that you got to put a bunch of work into, or you could find a commercial property that's like a light industrial business like this, where the business needs to be turned around, and maybe that suits your experience better, and you feel like you can turn that business around and that can make you an income. So just an interesting thing as far as how do you find properties like this. The crazy thing is it was listed online like a business listing would be. It's just not on the business listing websites. It was on LoopNet, which is like a real estate listing site. So
they also do businesses,
and they do businesses as well. So
9 times out of 10, though, if you want that business tie into real estate, they're going to have it. I remember about a year and a half ago it was that I was looking for something, and I stumbled across a very nice facility that was a sort of warehouse out in like Nona style, but it was in that newer, nice area. And it was a fully built out dog kennel and play area with a working bar and a strange concept, but it was built out. It was a fully functional pet center, basically, pet daycare. but the business was dead. The woman had just, unfortunately, not been able to keep it going, and not, I think she got hit with. I think she did it right before COVID hit, and even though Florida wasn't COVID crazy, I think it was just she was in wrong place, wrong time, and it just, she was just trying to recoup, and she wanted a lot of money for it because she was selling it as not only is this real estate, but this is your next business. And what I think her broker failed to convey was that if a building that's a business has no clients, it is not a business, it is simply a building. So LoopNet is probably your best chance to find something where somebody maybe did make something and maybe it didn't go well, and you could come in on the cheap, get the real estate and possibly a built out business that you can either kickstart or restart in this case.
And that's the interesting thing about this is like you're probably, if you're willing to take on something like this, I mean, you're part of a unique pool of people, right? Most people are either going to look at this and say, okay, either the business is valuable and is growing, is cash flowing, and I'll buy it based off of that, or the real estate is priced right such that I could put a tenant in and make my return on investment that way. You're taking a risk and you're putting yourself in a weird situation taking something like this on. What does that mean? That means it's going to drive away a lot of people. What does that mean? That's going to drive down the price. So you might be able to get it at a lower price, right? This type of situation is probably going to sit on the market for quite a while, which means they're going to have to take less money for it because it's a difficult situation. Let's just call it what it is, right? If you can't put a tenant, if the business is wanting to continue and you can't put a tenant in right away, how do you make your money back? You have to make it from the business that's in it, which you're now responsible for running. So it's a weird situation, but if you find yourself fitting that niche where you think you could actually take that on, then you're probably going to be able to find a sweetheart type of deal with this.
Oh, for sure. I think it's all about looking in all the unusual places and trying to find those people that maybe, if you have the knowledge base and they're done, they're over it, and they're past it well beyond that point, you stand to have a very good opportunity. But again, I caution you against getting too deep, and specifically have your capital ready, because traditional traditional loans and lending might not be available to you in many situations.
Or you're going to have to get them just exclusively off of the real estate. So it would need to be priced exclusively off of what the real estate is worth. That might be the case. And I think you would also want to have some working cap. Not, I think you would also want to have some working capital set aside for being able to take over a business like this too, because you're going to take over the business. You're going to be responsible for payroll, the next payroll cycle. So lots of ifs, but if you're the type of person with some cash set aside, you're trying to figure out the right type of deal to do, maybe this one makes sense. But till next time, we do this every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We talk about, like Ryan said earlier, business deals, business sales, and buying. And let us know if you find us on LinkedIn or something. Message us. Let us know what you want us to talk about. We'll see you on the next one.